So I've been a Gia Tolentino fan for a really long time, but I have to tell you that I just had an experience this morning when I was in my 6:30 a.m. bar class. Yes. And, the Jonas Brothers, it was pumping in and it was so loud, but even louder than that was Gia's words that were kind of penetrating into my reality. Let me just read you really quickly. Jessica turned the lights off and chirped that it was time for back dancing, a term that I thought, collapsing onto the floor, sounded like what people on a parenting message board might use as a euphemism for sex. It wasn't. In fact, pretend fucking. We laid on our backs and thrust our hips into the darkness with a sacrificial devotion that I had not applied to actual sex for years. So I bring that up because I had this revelation at 6:30 in the morning that I'd done this thing so many times, but with so little attention. Gia's writing gave me deeper entrance into my own experience. To me, what is so extraordinary about her work, in Jezebel, The Hairpin, The New Yorker, and in her new collection, is the generosity of her worldview. She offered a critical analysis of the ridiculous moves that we make in bar and the whole culture around it, but it wasn't judgment. She is anti-pleasure as she asks us together, how can we have nice things without those nice things eating us alive? I'm wary of all the voice of generation stuff, but I know that no one else's essays have the brutal momentum of hers. This gathering ability, even as she tears things apart. Here's this thing. Let's look at it together. Follow the fire of my thoughts, and I won't give you an answer, but I'll happily give you more questions. What this appreciation means for my bar practice, I have no idea. But I do know as a reader that I'm just completely exhilarated by her work. We are absolutely thrilled to have in conversation with Gia, Kat Chow. If you don't know, which you should, Kat is a reporter with NPR. Thank you. She's a reporter with NPR, a founding member of the Code Switch team, but she's currently on sabbatical, working on her own book, forthcoming from Grand Central, that digs deep into questions about grief, race, and identity that her mother's sudden death triggered when she was a young girl. Please help me welcome Kat Chow and Gia Tolentino.
This is on.
Hey.
This is fucking insane.
I don't think there's enough people here.
You guys, thank you for standing. Holy shit. I'm sorry if anyone got wet on the way here. What the fuck?
It felt like the world was ending.
Yeah. I hope the lights go off, honestly.
I know, that'd be so fun. We could just tell ghost stories for an hour.
Yeah.
So how's it going?
Good. Thank you for real. Thank you for doing this. I am a great admirer of Kat's.
Oh, my pleasure. Likewise. So can you bring us back to the moment when you decided to write this book?
Yeah. I mean, probably the actual moment where I decided to write the book there were two. So I think probably I would guess all of us. I woke up the morning after the election and I was I'm never going to be sure of anything again. And I hope I'm not. I was so aware of where my sense of, I had felt so sure of this moral narrative about the world and I had thought it was predictive. And I woke up just with this searing nausea of how that doesn't work in our world anymore. The more we can understand something perfectly, we can understand the moral stakes of it. And it doesn't necessarily translate into the things that we had wanted or hoped, right? And it was that was all I could think about. And as a writer, that filled, if your job is to understand something and to express it clearly and you no longer are sure what the exact use of that is anymore, that was just this deep feeling of uncertainty. I sat in it for 4 months and then then I was okay, you're going to be miserable and you're going to be in agony. You're going to be anxious. You're going to be thinking, you're going to be like this till 2020 at the very earliest. And I was well, one way to turn agony into something that's possibly productive is write a book. And I think I was just in February of 2017, I started thinking is there a kind of clarity about the world that is compatible with this uncertainty. And I was like, can I write a book to see if there is and what it would look like?
And so you use the phrase self-delusion. And how did you come up with that as sort of like the thesis for your book?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I'm extremely good at it. And
Aren't we all though right now?
yeah. And I actually, so the thing is, I think self-delusion is to a large degree, not a large degree, to some extent, it is natural and necessary, right?
It's a survival mechanism.
It's a survival mechanism. We have to believe that we're here, that what we're doing is worthwhile, even though like a lot of science point to it's not, like we have to believe that things are, to be a writer, you have to believe that what you have to say is like important and, maybe it's not. I think, and self-delusion, like, I think that, my cheerleading coach in high school used to say, fake it till you feel it. And it's not exactly the attitude I go through life with, but there are certain things like, when I'm talking to a friend and, I say in the book, when a friend is going on about something and I'm like, I'm actually so tired, I want to go to sleep. I'm like, okay, Gia, you're a good friend. Be here, be a good friend. And then in 5 minutes I am, I think that kind of self-delusion is great, but the real answer to this question is it's like obviously the internet. Like, it's the internet is structured around social platforms that put our personal identity at the very center of the universe. Like programmatically, the architecture of the universe is like, I say in the book that it's like, sitting on a vantage point and looking out at the whole world and everything somehow looks like your own reflection. And it seemed to me that, on the internet where selfhood is monetized and remonetized and sold against other selfhood, it's like knowing yourself seems like a mandate and an impossibility simultaneously.
Right.
And I'm interested in that, like things about our world that are required and impossible, that are like incredibly attractive and incredibly repulsive at the same time.
And so something that you said before about like learning to trust yourself, how did you come to this point where you were like, yes, I'm going to write this book and put myself out there? Like, where did this trust come from in this moment?
I actually think that writing the book was like part of why I wanted to do it was to put myself out there less for a while. Like I didn't think about this part. I also didn't anticipate that anyone would read it. Like I started blogging. I mean, as I say in the book, I started fucking blogging when I was like 10 years old and set up an Angel Fire website. And I have taken really naturally to these mechanisms of self-broadcasting all my life. Like I ended up on a reality TV show when I was 16. Like I did all this stuff. I had been writing in public. Basically, I'd been blogging since I started writing, like, as a career. I don't know why I'm putting that in quotes. And I was kind of, I think it was sort of the same thing when you're on the internet and it's just the world is sort of pinging against your brain all the time. You feel like you can't quite think straight. And I was worrying that my writing was getting to be like that too. Like I wanted to work in private. I actually didn't even, I would say maybe the central motivation for writing this book is wanting to have a little secret for a year and a half. And
I like how you put that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, aren't you finding it fun on leave? Like writing your book now?
I feel like writing a book is not, it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm on the spot now.
You're like, yeah, I love it. Yeah.
I mean, you do have a lot of time to kind of retreat into yourself.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, there's something, I mean, the book is eventually a part of this too, but there's something about, I went to a fiction MFA program and I wrote a novel and I worked on it for 4 years and I shelved it. And that experience was one of the most rewarding writing experiences of my life, working on something. Yeah. And I think that we live in a time where we are sort of incentivized / required to monetize every last bit of labor and effort and pleasure and play in our relationships and our free time and our spare bedrooms and all that stuff. And there was something about just taking myself off of that wheel of constant production. But then of course, I just put myself back on it harder than I ever had with this book. Didn't really think this through.
So what was your process like though? I mean, how did you come up with all of these ideas and when you were working on this?
I think, so, there are those things that, when a friend brings them up at like a bar or something, you just talk too much, you like there were these things that I would find myself just talking about like they were that's kind of, I feel like I operate on a calculus of chemistry with everything that I write about. It's like you have different chemistry with different people. Some people you could ride that out for a really long time or forever, right? And I think that it's like that with certain subjects for me. Like I know that there's some sort of friction, some sort of productive friction and some sort of ease there. And these subjects were all in that line, but they were basically like, I feel like I've compared it to like a bunch of sheets of like fly paper on the wall of my brain, and stuff would just start sticking to them, like that optimization essay. You know, I'm glad to expose how lazy I am in bed for all of you. It was just these things. Like I worked, the Jezebel office was directly upstairs from the Lululemon flagship store in Union Square. And you know that Mixed Up Files of Miss Basil Lee Frankweiler book? Yeah. Right, where they like hide in the Met for a week. I was like, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to hide in Lululemon. You know, and I'm just going to see how long I can stay in there. And I would just walk by it. I would walk by it, and I would just have like a mini stroke, you know? Like I would just be like, this is late capitalist fetish wear. And I didn't know why I thought that. And then, you know, I would also like leave for lunch, and I'd be like on Slack, like, you know, passing Lululemon, and then like I'd stroke out and be like, ugh. And then I would go to Sweet Green and like, you know, send more emails while I was getting my salad. And then I'd eat more salad while I was, you know, send more emails while I was eating my salad. And I was just like, what? This sense of relentless acceleration and how it applies to the body and how it applies to aspiration and how it applies to women's bodies specifically, like the way that the female body is turned very explicitly into a market asset by Instagram and totally. Basically everything. It was just like these things kept accumulating until that February. I was like, okay, I could write 10,000 words on each of these things. So maybe I should, because the New Yorker's not going to let me write 10,000 words on my like, you know, like athleisure as capitalist fetish wear theory. Or they might have, but it wouldn't have been as vulgar.
It was wonderful. I mean, so I feel like one thing that your essays do so well is that it opens up a door basically to XYZ topic, and then you walk into another one, and it's just like you're going through this house where there's just so many different rooms, and it's like at the end, you know, you've just opened the reader up to so many different ideas. How do you build upon these ideas in your writing?
So I think when I think, like I tried to explain this the other day, and my boyfriend was like, this makes no sense to me. But so I think I was thinking of all of these essays as each one was about a question. Yeah. And each question would lead me to a subject, and it would look like, I picture it as kind of an irregularly shaped gemstone, and you just have to rotate it under the light like 10 times, and finally you'll be able to see what the sides are. Yeah. And
that makes sense to me.
Yeah. He was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, a gemstone. Like, you know, like, come on, dog. Like, it's a fucking gemstone. Yeah. I think that one of the reasons I picked these things were things that I felt like I needed to look at in all of those different ways in order to see them clearly, to see the contours of what I was even looking at. And I think when I get a subject, it's like, actually, I mean, the research for me is the most fun part. It's like, I'm going to read everything that's ever been written, or, you know, obviously not everything, but I'm going to read as much as I can about this, as widely as I can, because one of the things that the internet, and I think writing on the internet does, the internet it has this feeling of kind of perpetual present, you know, like it's sort of, we're all arriving at conclusions that people arrived at in the labor movement in like 1899. Sure, yeah. Like, it's like, and one of the things that I wanted to do was to just really get more dimensions and more depth into a subject. Like, I think, to learn more about it than I like, a way that I could only do if I was like, I'm spending a year and a half on this, you know?
10,000
like not
words.
not like for, you know, a blog post, it's, you know, it's 1,000 words, which is fine. But I feel like the book was a premise for me to learn about these things for as long as I could, which I should have taken longer, but
also, fine. I mean, you were saying that you started each one with a question. So how did you know that you were done answering it?
I think so. in general in writing, and kind of it's like I've lowered my expectations for life to literally just almost nothing. But I think, I mean, all that I'm looking for. So in writing, the idea that I have never, basically all I hope for my own writing, just at work in general, is that I can shift my own thinking a little bit, that I'll get somewhere new at all.
Yeah.
You know, I've stopped thinking that I'll find the answer to anything ever. And I certainly not thinking about, convincing anyone of anything, or, even I question the tangible use of understanding things all the time even. But what I do want, and what I do think is accessible for all of us, is we can keep, what I don't want is for my brain to lock down on what I already think, And so in general, with any piece I write, I feel like I'm done when, I always talk about this. Deborah Eisenberg, in some Art of Fiction interview at Paris Review, she talks about writing as making a set of givens yield.
Yeah.
And I think about that. That's all I'm trying to do in life, right? It's all I want is for this set of givens to yield a little bit, for there to be something, there to be some more room. And I think that feeling that something has shifted is mostly what I was after. I don't think there's even a definitive, I've been thinking about this for 2 months. Ever since I went to my first marketing meeting for this book, they were like, "So, what is the one takeaway, for writers?" And I was like, "Oh, there's almost none of these essays have a takeaway." And I was like, "I've made a huge mistake," But I also, so there was never an answer. I don't think I successfully answered any of these questions, but I think I got somewhere new enough that, I don't know, we could all find our own version of it. I also
But how do you know when you're satisfied personally? And I think that,
How do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I think when I feel like what you were saying, when you've kind of just moved to the needle.
Yeah. I think you just know, right? And I think that to me is one of the most satisfying things about realizing that all of the hours I spent blogging about stupid shit have finally added up to is
coalesced into something.
Yeah. And I think I know, when I start a piece, I know how much trouble it's going to be, which is the greatest gift in the world. And I also, you just know, when it's done, when a conversation's done, when, it's time to leave dinner, it's time to leave the bar. You just know. I think.
And so is there a piece in recent years that you've worked on where you've read it again and been like, whoa, I totally would have, moved into a different direction, and you've wanted to return to it and write something about it again?
That's a great question. I do not read things after I've done with them but there is. So in 2015 or something, I wrote a piece about Cracker Barrel for the New York Times Magazine. I love Cracker Barrel. Y'all know what I mean? The country store.
So good,
we all love that Cracker Barrel country store. The wall of candles, it's so good. And the free biscuits and whatever. So and also Cracker Barrel is it's pretty sus. It's very, it's very obviously this sort of, wouldn't it be fun if this was the antebellum South or whatever? It's not, but yet I love it. And I wrote this Obama era piece, where I was history is redeemable, it was a very maybe we can rewrite the ills of history with our enthusiasm for Cracker Barrel, whatever. And it's I was so wrong. Even though Cracker Barrel recently, there was that news story, they recently kicked out some racist person for something, Cracker Barrel, they also had this discrimination suit against LGBTQ workers. It's a complicated thing. I was too optimistic about Cracker Barrel, and I live with this guilt every day.
That is a lot of optimism for it.
I love Cracker Barrel, though. My family once spent an entire road trip. So I grew up in Houston, and my parents are Filipino immigrants from Canada. And we once drove back to Toronto and stopped at Cracker Barrel for every meal, as a bit. And
what did you order? What was your thing?
I always got breakfast, which is so gross. It's really disgusting. But I, playing the little game, it's, we love that game. But yeah.
Wow. Okay. So how, basically, your books hit so much on how everything is monetized. Yeah. And it really kind of like messed with me when I read it for the first time. And I was like, how do I even function as a human in the world? And I was wondering, like how do you even participate in this society without really like falling trap to your body being commodified, your writing being commodified? Yeah. And I guess, how do you navigate that, especially in a writing sense? Like the act of writing in a way feels like you're participating in this system too.
Yeah, I was recently, so I've been literally talking about this at every book stop, but if y'all, like, I strongly recommend Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing. It like really, really fucked me up. Partly because I was like, oh, I was like, capitalism has warped me at the level of desire, you know? And I have a hard time, it's like I have produced at such a rate, like such a near, I mean, I am a compulsive writer and I always have been, but I have, as with everything, I mean, the book is basically about how I have adjusted to and taken pleasure in and bent my selfhood around systems that are corrosive to it. And I think that the condition of being alive right now is often that of knowing you're benefiting from systems that are, if you're lucky, benefiting from systems that are crushing other people, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, on the one hand, I want to stop orienting my life around production, around monetizable production. On the other, writing is the thing that I love to do most in the world. And I think there'll never be squaring that. And Jenny talks, like, capitalism has a way of, it can appropriate resistance to it within, 5 seconds of you uttering that resistance.
Yeah,
you can, in writing a book that's about capitalism, I have tried, I'm trying to use it to solidify my market position. There's nothing, like there's no way around that. There's no way around that. And I think that the way that I cope with it was like partly just writing this book to see, can I have these two ideas in my head at once that the systems that I take pleasure in are also the systems that are ruining me, and like, what's the way, the only way forward is just dead straight into that contradiction. And I do think that, one of the kind of most beautiful and strange things also about being alive right now is that we're all engaged in this collective project of trying to be more human in the context of systems that de-incentivize humanness. Yeah. And it's like all of our way forward is completely individual, and it's going to be however we do it, which is part of the reason I don't really write about, like I've been saying, like, one thing that's been interesting about this book and the sort of capitalist, realism/fatalism that it has in it, is that like boomers are reviewing the book and being like, Tolentino's cynicism, like borders on the deeply fatalistic, and then Gen Z kids are reviewing it for their college papers and they're like, this book filled me with hope, and I'm like, I think our sense of how intractable, like the sense of like how fucked we are is so generational, I feel. And I think, and I feel myself on the end of it that is like a little bit younger, that's like, to even articulate, to even be able to admit and live with this problem is like the necessary first step and possibly all I'm capable of doing right now. I'm certainly not capable of telling other people how they should live with these contradictions, but I think I wanted to use the book as like, here is like maybe a really dizzying house and you'll step out and like have a little bit clearer of a sense of how you want to start walking,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah.
How does it feel though to, have people look to you as though you've written this guide,
Yeah.
I mean, what does that do to you? It's been strange, mostly because that was the actual thing I was wanting not to do, right? I was like, can this book be useful if it is not providing that? Like, one of the things that's driven me nuts in writing for so long, is when a piece, like when a piece starts and ends on the same thought. It's like the whole point is to change it, to like open something else. And also when there's this rhythm at the end of essays and op-ed pieces that's sort of like
and that's why it's all gonna be okay, right? You know, it's like, and that's why we should all like, you know, and here's hoping we'll do the right thing, right? Like it's this movement that's this like sort of certainty and prescription, and like one of the only things I was trying to do in the book was avoid it. And I think there's also how I've been reacting to it is like sometimes I will leave the most important thing out of whatever I'm writing because I don't, or the most obvious point. Like
your large adult son.
Yeah. I've talked about this. Like I wrote this piece about that large adult sons meme, and it's like that was a piece about race. Like it was a piece about how like white men get to be called boys till they're Donald Trump Jr. and you know black boys, you know, at Trayvon Martin's age are considered full grown adults. And I didn't put that in the piece because it's so obvious, you know, and I didn't want to be like, and this meme explains the Trump president, you know, like it's so obvious. And I think one thing about this book is like that I haven't known how to talk about because I'm not sure if it's too obvious or is that one thing that the book did teach me was that I worry so much about my own self and my own morality. And the real thing that the book taught me was that like none of like individual action, like we know it with like climate change, it just individual action, it's easy for us to think about because we all think about ourselves all the time, but it doesn't matter. Like the solutions are all policy level, they're all systemic. And I think what those solutions are really obvious. Yeah. But I haven't known how to talk about that because I don't know. Yeah, it's strange. I'm like, I don't fuck it. Like I can tell you.
Do you find, or I mean, I guess what was the hardest thing in the actual writing process? I mean, was it the ideas? Was it the act of writing itself? Or was it balancing your job too? Because you were writing full time for the New Yorker. But
yeah, I think it was really that sense that, like, I don't know, this is a bad sales pitch for the book, but I think it was that overarching sense of like, it was hardest to write about that sense I had that understanding a situation might mean nothing. And it was hard to write about that in a way that wouldn't paralyze the writing.
Yeah.
You know, or just be like such a bummer. I think it was the hardest thing maybe was writing about, because the book, this is why I'm so surprised. Like, I'm so grateful that people are fucking reading it, is that it's a dense book. It's a dense book and it's about the world being a nightmare. And that's not like a great sell, you know? And I think the hardest thing was figuring out how to present that in a way that there was some air. There was some air in the book at all,
yeah.
You know?
And I mean, how did you find...
Also, not taking time off work, I should have done that.
But I mean, how did you find air for yourself? Like, what was the thing that was keeping you, you know, above water and not just like, I'm drowning in this...
Yeah.
Whatever this is.
Well, I think it's the same thing that keeps me above air just in general, right? Yeah. Like we are living in sort of a near universally acknowledged like hellscape, and yet like we're having fun still, right? Like we are finding little ways to have fun, and we are taking pleasure in some of the things that make this world a hellscape. And I think I just tried, that actually was the solution. It was partly the things in my life that would give me relief. They all made it into the book in some way, kind of like, I think also one thing that I am really good at is like, I am sometimes, you know, like painfully on the internet, but when I'm off, I'm really, really off. Yeah. And that I think is the best. I got really good at, you know, putting my phone down for, you know, 24 full hours and just, you know, never looking at it. And I think, yeah, but it was also, I think like, reconceiving pleasure as something that's, you know, cannot be disentangled from, you know, understanding these things as very inextricable. Yeah. That helped me.
Yeah. Oh man. That just sounds like such a hard book to write though. Yeah, I'm really going through it. But so like what were you consuming as you were writing this?
I sometimes think so. My favorite part of any piece is the research stage because you can do it while you're like lazy or hungover, you know, like, you know, you don't have to like interview people. You don't have to like, I was luxuriating in, I just read, I think so before I even pitched, but when I was putting together a proposal, I put together like a reading list. And I was like, okay, there is enough intelligence from other people here that you will be able to build upon. So every essay I put together this long reading list and would just read anything that I could about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I never read what I read for pleasure never has anything. Like you know how people, when they're writing something, will try to like either avoid or only read things that are kind of.
Totally. Yeah.
And I'm just like such a promiscuous and like reader that I just, was like, whatever.
Yeah. Just do it.
Yeah.
Can I ask about your fiction days and what that switch from going from fiction to nonfiction and blogging, and then now kind of like writing a book that's so nonfiction. Yeah. How did that shift work for you?
Well, shout out to my agent, Amy, right there. Who picked me up for my novel. And I was like, I'm shelving it. She was like, cool, you'll write another one. She knew. I loved writing fiction so much. Have you ever done it?
Yeah, for fun. But.
Yeah. Do you think, I went to UVA for college, and we got some, y'all, there's a UVA chapter in the book. Ugh, like, like haven't heard from too many people in Charlottesville. I loved UVA. I've written about UVA. I mean, UVA was in the middle of this like incredible, horrible season of just like the blood was coming out of the soil kind of, and I would get some really nasty emails from former classmates being like, like that school gave you so much, like, how could you criticize? And I was like, which is so rude, even though they did, they did give me a lot. They gave me like a debt-free life, which is, life-changing.
That's great. Yeah.
It's life-changing. But I sort of feel like I was like, this is the only way I can express my love for an institution is by it's attention, whatever. But so, wait, the fiction thing.
Fiction, yeah.
I had at UVA has this great English department, and I would take fiction classes on the side of I just took an extra class every semester because I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
And I never thought that I was particularly good at it, but I also liked doing it. And so when I was back from Peace Corps, and this was like very post-recession, I was like, I'm never going to have a job. It's never going to involve writing. I was just like, I'm going to be taking like Craigslist, like gig work for the literal rest of my life. And I was like, okay, how can I get paid to write? Like, how can I? And so I applied to MFA programs that were fully funded, which is my advice, go if they're fully funded. And I loved for 2 years, like it was like pure pleasure. I think that writing fiction made me a lot better at sketching in a scene very quickly and being vivid with details and sort of cadence and dialogue and structure. Like writing that novel taught me a lot about structure that I still think I'm applying in my work. But I was talking about this, like if I got fired tomorrow, I would move to the woods and try to write another novel, but I haven't been able to write fiction since moving to New York because my brain is so much more hectic.
Yeah.
But for me, like fiction feels like art and magic, and journalism feels like work. And I've always been great at work, and I've never, I don't know, I think I'm a great consumer of art and magic, but I don't know but it was, so the switch was like, I felt like I was playing in a realm that I wasn't sure I should be allowed to enter with fiction. And then I slid kind of magically into a job in media with the Hairpin when I was in my grad school program. And I was like, oh, this is the thing that you can do. You can work at the pace of the internet. Your horrible broken brain is actually good at like this fast churn shit. And then basically the book thing, I was like, okay, you need to take yourself off this wheel before it becomes all you can do. Like I wanted to get back into, I'd also gone like, I had gone from barely being edited to being edited like into New Yorker house style. And I was like, okay, I need to see if what I sound like just writing for myself, and
sure.
not knowing what the audience was. I'm just like, has that been
It's
fun?
been so strange. I'm like, whoa, where's this writing coming from? And I really love it.
And you get to write just to you, basically,
Yeah,
I think.
It feels so intimate.
Yeah. And essentially I always think, because I sort of think that like, I never really think about people reading my work because I think down that road like lies madness, Like I think sort of thinking too much about how other people are I'd rather just pass my own bar of like, is this bearable, And so
where does that bar sit though? I mean, like,
I think, what do you mean?
I mean, like, is it, how did that bar get raised or lowered as you got older? Like,
I think that bar has always, I hope it's gotten raised since but I think it's pretty high. I think I think that one of the reasons that there's like maybe an intensity about, I think that it's like being alive is so crazy that it's like, I don't want to waste any of anyone's time. and I don't want to waste any of mine. And my own, like the bar that I'm passing for like, does this word mean anything? You know, it's like, it's such a granular thing that I'm trying to make myself pass every time I write a sentence that I'm sort of like, you know, I'm always writing for myself anyway, and hoping that I can just keep my own metric good enough that if it works for me, it'll hopefully work for other people. And so being able with a book, it was sort of formalized. Like you are just kind of writing to challenge yourself, right? And to stretch your own abilities and to see what you can make of something.
There's some really personal stuff in here where you talk about marriage and even religion, and it involves, you know, your partner and some family and, you know, the people who you grew up with. How, like, did you consider them in this picture as you were writing it? And how did you cope with that?
So I just had my book tour stop in Houston, and I was like, and like my like there were like some parents of my like it's you know it's kind of dicey, you know. I mean, I wrote about the school I went to, and it was kind of it was like a teacher that I had and like you know like teachers were there, and I was like, holy fuck. I think that when I write about my life, even like you can be super vivid about a little part of your life and keep a lot of it hidden. And it can seem, I mean, it is true that my best friends, I gave them the draft of this book when I was done, and they were like, people are going to know a lot about you. And I was like, oh, I guess they will. Yikes. You know, I didn't think about that. But I also instinctively know that, you know, my partner, he's like, you can't even find his last name on the internet, basically. Or I guess now you can, but like, sorry. Sorry, Andrew. But I think that I was especially careful to not, I mean, even when I write about myself, I try not to do it in a way that it is, the information being conveyed is about me primarily, right? I want it to be that it is clearly serving some other purpose.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
so I tried to use them in that way. And there are definitely things that are and will be off the table. And I gave the book, and I also like gave the book to them and was like,
to your point about, you know, when your friends were like, whoa, people are going to know everything about you. How did you emotionally steel yourself for, you know, events like this where people will probably come up and ask you super personal questions where you're like, whoa.
Well, so for better or worse, like I think this is the part of my personality that has led to, you know, me blogging on Angel Fire when I was 10 and me going on this reality TV show and me like mostly interacting with, you know, hellish Twitter from a standpoint of like, this is fun, you know? And then when, you know, I think it's like if I meet someone at a bar, I will know how they lost their virginity in 5 minutes and they will probably know it about me too. Like I've always been such an open book, and I've lately been wondering like how I've been like this since I was a toddler, but I'm sure it has gotten like hardened into my permanent personality by the mechanisms of the world. Like, you know, this can be good for you. But in LA, I had like this girl was incredible. She walks up to me in the signing line and she was like, I saw your tweet about how the Cats trailer made you want to do ketamine. You want some ketamine? And I was like, no, yes, no. Yeah, you know, like I was like, do I? No. Like, you know, like. And she was like, yeah, I didn't know if you would take drugs. And I was like, yeah, I would never. Like, you know, like I don't know.
But maybe after.
I know. And then she like Instagram DM'd me and I was like, all right. Like, but yeah, it is. I think mostly the weird thing is that it doesn't feel that weird. I think like this has been like realizing how naturally I have always taken to all of these systems that are extremely strange. Because I actually, you know, I don't, it's like people have also been asking me like, you know, like, how do you choose what to show of yourself on the internet and what to not? And I'm like, oh, I never think about it at all. Like, you know, and I think that, and I sort of feel that that's the only bearable way of operating in these systems is just going by instinct and not thinking too hard about it and hoping that yourself is, you know, decent enough to make that okay, right?
Yeah, well, decent enough by what standards?
Like decent enough, like I won't just like self-cancel, you know, like I won't just like tweet something super racist, like because it's what I'm thinking. Like I you know, like well, you know what I mean? Like I'm sort of like, someone asked me, has your employer ever gotten mad at you about something you've tweeted? Like you're tweeting about like being high or something. And I was just like, no, because I think that, if you have to change, if the internet, which is this thing that is, it is like a parallel para universe that is, this like simulacrum that's like inextricable from real life. If we have to be different people, like if we have to fake who we are on the internet, like it's all over,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Decent by my standards, I guess, which might not be decent for everybody. I mean, which isn't decent for everybody for sure.
But I feel like that's what everyone can hope for themselves, right? Is to create their own standards, have their bar set at a certain place and move it, adjust it as, I don't know, time happens. So I think it's time to open this up for questions. So there's a couple mics here on either side of the room. And if you guys want to come up and ask some questions.
I guess I'm the first one. If you could do it again, would you get your MFA?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Because I didn't go into debt. For me, it was the best. Oh my God. I always think, I loved the people that I met there. They were like the people in my class were really, really good, and they were not egotistical, and they were incredibly generous readers. And mostly in terms of just craft, in terms of, I sometimes feel like I'll never be read as closely and with as much generosity as I was during the MFA, which can kind of be bad because like someone will submit a really terrible short story and everyone will be like, this should be a novel, like, but at the same time, that generosity, like what it meant to me as someone that was at the time, this is 2012, I was like, I don't know if I can write. I don't know if I will ever be able to get paid to write after this. I don't know if this is something that I didn't start calling myself a writer till like close to the end of the MFA. And I think it's hard to overestimate. Underestimate? Overestimate? All right. It's hard to overestimate how much that means when you're trying to, that like little greenhouse for right when you need it,
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Don't go into debt though. Yeah.
Hi. I'm also from Houston. So.
Oh, where?
Clear Lake.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was back there like 2 days ago and I stepped off the plane. It was like, 103 degrees and like
So hot,
99%
so
humidity. It was wild.
Sure.
My girlfriends were like, we live in the mouth of hell.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that in your research, you read a lot about the labor movement. That's kind of a thing that I feel like we are re-arriving at a lot. I'm wondering if in your research there are any kind of insights that you had or things that we should be learning from the labor movement given where we are now.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this with like that whole like Barstool Sports anti-union shit, and like Barstool's the one that has their slogan is like Saturdays are for the boys, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you have Saturdays because of the labor movement. Like it's so crazy. So specifically, I think a lot. I do. So in terms of feminism and in terms of labor organizing, I sometimes think about like I'm always like we could not learn enough from, a century ago. Like there is always so much. And I think one of the things that I write about and one of the things that bothers me the most about the internet is that it sort of sapped so much of the civic energy that would go into physical action, like we should have had a general strike in America, a year and a half ago. Right. And we have lost a lot of us. I mean, there is a great resurgence, and like I organized in my last workplace. Like we're on it, right? But and like the service workers union, the domestic workers union, they're doing amazing things now. But I also think that what I think about all the time about like the real like bread and roses shit is that there was a time where where the country was a lot more ready to take mass physical action and so much, and thinking about how so much of that energy has gotten swallowed up online. And I think I just think about it like that. Like I hope that we get back there. And I think that we're getting there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard to imagine like, air traffic controllers, right? Like even that strike.
Yeah. There's prosecution.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Hi. So I think you've gotten a lot of attention for the internet essay and infusing internet throughout all the essays, but I really appreciated the Pure Heroines essay.
Thanks.
So much. And I think a lot of your writing benefits from all of the feminist reading that you've done, all the work at Jezebel. Like, I wonder if you can just say a little bit more about how the male gaze informs sort of the performative gaze that we all do now. And how also, I think you've mentioned sort of, I don't know if anyone's going to ask a Pizzagate question, but you're right next to Pizzagate right now.
I know. That was the first thing I asked. I was like, what was that like for you? It sounds
worth
really
talking
bad.
about. I wonder if you can just say a little bit more about how sort of the male gaze has informed all of our sort of performative experience on the internet.
Wait, what about Pizzagate though?
How do you feel about talking next to it? That's all.
Oh.
2 questions.
I feel so much like sadness for the bookstore employees that had to deal with that, and like it's terrible. But yeah, so I do think so. There's that John Berger like ways of seeing, right? Probably a lot of us have read this thing that women, you have from a very early age, you have to be very aware of how the world sees you because you have to calibrate. You have to be. It is kind of explicitly taught to you. I think as soon as I started reading YM magazine when I was 7 or whatever, like I understood that I had to be appealing. I understood that this was something that the world would require of me and want of me, right? And you become aware of how to calibrate yourself according and to understand how other people are processing you naturally. And I think this is why women have conquered the personal branding sectors of the internet. It's why women tend to build, and it's such a it's such a double-edged sword, right? To have successfully adjusted. It's the same thing as like, the only careers in which women out-earn men are porn and modeling and Instagram influencing. And, it's like to succeed, like these things are useful tools. I have tried to make use of them in my own life and still do. Not porn and modeling, but, like trying to be like whatever, like cute and appeal. Like it's like, and it's thinking about, and I think that this situation, this sort of monstrous situation of having to be aware of yourself and having to think about how other people see you and having to understand your success in the world is contingent on that. This is being generalized. Like I think there is a connection between that and the sort of growing reality that, you better, like, if you get in a bike accident when you're uninsured, you might have to start a GoFundMe and get people to like you on the internet, get people to look at you and like you. And women are really good at getting people to look at them and like them. And I just think that so much of this sort of like panopticon of monetized approval and disapproval, it's like, we've just sort of generalized the situation that women have always had to live under, and now we're all finding out that it's hell. Oh yeah.
Hi. Thank you guys so much for speaking. It's extremely lit to see 2 Asian American women up here.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
So in Trick Mirror, you referenced one of Ilya Kaminsky's poems. I think it was called "We Lived Happily During the War." So when you write about things that, are like the war, such as during the Kavanaugh hearings last year, up to now writing about like, Lululemon as like capitalist fetish wear. How do you mediate between like living well and living happily, but also knowing that terrible things are happening around us and we're living in a terrible hellscape?
I don't know. How do you do it? Like, I'm genuinely asking. Like, what?
I take an SSRI.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I fucking smoke a lot of weed, Yeah. Like, yeah, I walk my dog and smoke a lot of weed. I think, the Kavanaugh stuff was raw. Like, I think one of the things that I would like to get better at is allowing myself to be softer, because I think that my reaction to so much of life and because of how I ended up in this, like, I just think I've operated from a standpoint of just like, I am going to fucking muscle through this and I'll have a good time, And I think that it's an attitude that I wouldn't want to lose about myself, but I don't think it's healthy. Basically what I'm saying is like, I cope by muscling through it and then just inhaling pleasure through whatever way I can get it. And I think that's okay. I think that's an okay way to live. And it unlocks me every time to the fact that like, life is if any of y'all read the Three Body trilogy, like there are just certain things that make you remember that life, like the fact of being alive no matter what, is amazing, you know? And I think that I reach for that understanding through semi-extreme measures. And I'm trying to not need to do either as much. I'm trying to let myself be softer for how hard it actually is. Like, you know, you don't, like, the thing is I feel so guilty. Like I wrote about E. Jean Carroll's essay, and it's like, I think this is a problem we probably all think about, where it's like our pain, if we don't have a family member at the border, our pain over that, we can feel guilty for even having that. We can feel useless for even having that pain, and we can get into, and I think that I've just been trying to think about like allowing myself to admit that it fucks me up when I write about that stuff. And I think that, yeah. And like, maybe, I mean, but what I do is like, yeah, I get high, put my speakers in the shower and listen to a whole album start to finish. And then I'm okay. Thank you. Yeah.
So as a journalist, you've probably like written some stuff you kind of now disagree with, kind of as you've evolved and your opinions have changed too. So how do you cope with being held accountable for something that you disagree with and people treating you as if you still think the same thing?
Oh no.
So I would say, are you a journalist?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, I got on Twitter in 2012, which is like kind of late-ish. I got Twitter, and I think someone was like, are you going to go back and delete all your all your stupid tweets now that like people know who you are? I'm like, no, I'm going to answer for my fucking stupid tweets. And I think that, like one of the things that I write about in the first essay is like, I want to understand myself as, and a reviewer put it really amazingly today, I want to understand myself as this sort of unimportant matter of fact. Like I want to understand myself as like I exist as a way to understand the world, and that's it. And an inconsistent self full of problems. And I've treated this two ways, is like, number one, I've tried to be very careful from the beginning not to reach for a conclusion that I might think is overreaching later. Like I've been aware from the beginning, because the blogosphere was already kind of hectic enough by the time I started working, that I was aware that like it's so easy to go too far on the internet. It's so easy to take a stand, you know, for the sake of it. And I was just don't do that. Protect yourself by not doing it in the first place. And then second, if you fuck up, just being like, I fucked up, and then it's okay. Yeah. Thank you. Akash, wait, hold on. Let me just tell you all a story. As my friend Akash, I was in Peace Corps with him. And so Akash, love you. Okay, but so here's the real story. Here's the real applause. So I was like, we were all constantly in trouble. And I was once Skyping my boyfriend in an internet cafe while like disguised as a schoolgirl, because I was grounded to my village. And I had been working on a novel, because I was like, okay, I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be about 4 girls that have just graduated from college, and like it takes place over the course of one summer day, and like all this shit. I'd written like 150 pages, and the novel was called Girls. And then someone jacked my laptop like while I was Skyping. And you know, in Peace Corps, it's like everything, you know, like your laptop is like literally your like literal lifeline. And I think I cried for 4 days straight. I was like with all my friends, and this I just threw myself at their feet, and they like patted me. And then at the end of that, Akash was like, Gia, you can have my laptop, because I know that writing will make you feel better. I need it. Yeah.
I mean, it would make me feel better too to read your writing. So, so I was just wondering, if you were to include another essay in this collection, what it would be about.
Guess. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been like, so there are moments where that experience peaks out, and I think like that is the one time in my life where I really did genuinely unravel, I think. And so one thing that my other friend's like, yeah, you did, bitch. Like, but I think about that. So I wrote a lot during Peace Corps, but I wrote other things, right? I would write like little stories for us. Like I wouldn't do the thing that I've done since I was 11, which was, you know, record my life. And I don't keep a journal anymore, but I basically, you know, I'm producing so much writing that I have this record of my life. And there was something about Peace Corps where it seemed like the entire project of being there was that we were supposed to decenter ourselves in our imagination, right? Then I was like, it was incompatible to me with writing 1,000 words every day about like, this was what the breakfast was, like it just seemed, I wanted to see what it was like. I wanted to see if it helped me like understand myself more, diminish myself more, to not write. And so one of the reasons I didn't write about Peace Corps was that I don't have the record. I can't trust myself not to twist the story. And that's what all of that writing has always helped me do. I don't trust whatever narrative I've made out of it because I've already surely manipulated it. And I don't even know to make myself seem better or worse. Like I can't tell. And I realize now that I should have, like, maybe it's all that writing that would have helped me decenter myself. I thought at the time that it would only put me at the, and I think in retrospect, it might have taken me this long to understand that that's that function that writing does. It's this thing that seems like self-magnification, but the way I've tried to use it is to show me how to diminish or something. Yeah, that was it.
Thanks.
A little short. Hold on. Okay. I'm actually asking this question on behalf of a friend who's an editor with ArtNet in the New York Times. Cool. First off, she calls you a queen, so that's her compliment to you.
Thank you.
And then she's asking, if you get a chance to ask a question, can you tell her that your writing friend is blocked? And asked for what her advice is for writer's block, if anything. I asked for clarification. She said, I am just blocked, can't form real sentences, she'll understand.
Yeah. So I think it's about chemistry, Like if something's dead, you can't force it. But there are two kinds of writer's block. Like there's one where the subject is dead, like you're not getting anywhere new.
Yeah.
And you kind of like sometimes you should abandon that project and switch. Like sometimes writer's block is a signal that you need to switch to something new. But if it's a subject that you still have chemistry with but can't work out how it is, I feel like the answer is I'm talking about all these things like they're relationships, but it's like you do what you would do in a relationship. You take some time off and then you meet the thing again in the place where you will generate something, And it's like maybe you got to take a year off of that subject. Maybe you got to try something new for 6 weeks, Yeah.
All right, I'll pass that along. Thank you.
Hi, Gia. I think I've loved you since maybe it was 2015 when you helped me embrace something about myself that I hate fall. It's the worst
Thank
season.
you. Thank you so much. The season of dread and death.
Yeah. Everyone else is like, so productive. I'm like, no, I hate it.
Only the season after. I've like tried to grow up and like it some more, but like, because I think part of the reason I hate it is like, I'm a baby. I want to be at the pool, But I like.
No shame.
Yeah.
No
but
shame.
I think, fall is objectively the only season after which the next season is worse. And so like, fuck that,
Yeah.
Like I think I said in that piece, it's like, I'd rather be dead than thinking about it,
So my question is, what's the first book you remember loving and what's the first book you remember hating?
Ooh, that's spicy. That's so spicy. I can't remember the first book I loved because I can't remember. I think like probably a lot of us, I just, I read just everything I could get my hands on. I read, I think, all of those like children's books with those heroines that were so brave and so crazy, like I loved those so much. I don't remember what came first, but it was like all the classics, like the Betsy Tacy books, anyone? Yeah, the Betsy Tacy books and Laura Ingalls books, the Mixed Up Files. I highly recommend for my Mixed Up Files heads out there, if you haven't read her other book, The View from Saturday. It's so good. It's like such a perfect, like maybe it was like the Boxcar Children, it was just like anything I get my hands on is my favorite. And maybe I was saying today, I was doing like a buy the book thing for the Times, and they asked me what is the book that you would recommend to everyone under 18. And I said Random Family by Adrienne Nicole LeBlanc, which is a perfect book. And it's so spicy. Like it's so amazing. And it made me think about reading A Separate Peace in high school. And I was just like, and like my teacher wouldn't talk about the good part, which is that they're gay and in love, And I I was like, it kind of radicalized me because I was like, if it's possible that our teacher is making us read this shit for 6 weeks, then anything's possible, you know? Yeah. What was the first book you hated?
Oh, yeah, I was just talking about this with my friend. I remember hating Ivanhoe.
Oh, yeah, I never even tried with that one.
Yeah, but we were discussing, like what it makes, why you hate a book. And for me, it was like the societal expectation that this is a good book.
Yeah.
And I did not relate at all
and
with
it's
the maleness of it. And I felt ashamed of that.
Right. And that's what that whole essay, that's what that one essay in the book is about. This whole thing that like, you read fucking, like no shots to like the Nick Adams fishing stories. Like they're wonderful. Like, but you read Hemingway and you're like, this is about what it is to be alive. Mm-hmm. And then,
you're like,
and it's like the men's experience gets painted as this universal. You read all these war stories. You read All Quiet on the Western Front, and it's like this is about the human condition, And then women's novels about women are about how society has ruined them. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I can't. Like all of those books where they're supposed to be universal. Like I hated Catcher in the Rye. Like just no time for that. Yeah.
We have time for one more question, so please go ahead. Yeah, you're
Perfect.
good.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, because I've been thinking about doing this for a while, if you recommended joining the Peace Corps.
Got my row right there.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. I will say it will be, like, I was told this a million times before I left. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to understand this until you're there. It will be nothing like what you think it is. And the ways it will be hard are nothing like the ways that you think they'll be hard. It'll be hard, and the ways in which it's rewarding will be nothing like the ways you hoped. And in that, it was one of the most important experiences of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it's also, like in a lot of ways, I think of it as like a great failure on my part. And I also, because I like was always in trouble, I left early, like it was this whole thing. And I think that like the way I describe it, how people say humbled when they really mean that they're honored, like I'm so humbled to get this award, it's like Peace Corps is humbling. It's humbling. It will like bring you to your knees. And that's what I wanted, but I didn't know the way that it would deliver, and it was really intense. But that being said, it was the fucking best.
Yeah, it being humbling is exactly what I want from it too.
Yeah, but so humbling, like a true humbling, right? It is like it's twinned with devastation. You know what I mean? To be really humbled, you have to be willing to be just fully broken apart by the experience. And I think I thought like humility is this like, this will place me in the context of world systems and I'll understand. Like I wanted this sort of knowledge of, I wanted to know the difference. I mean, and this sort of concern carries through the book, the difference between, wanting to do good and being able to. I wanted to understand that better, and I got, a larger education in it than I could have anticipated. But yeah, I recommend it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kat.
Thanks for talking.